Hey, this is Wally, and you're listening to the Young Justice Files on the Whelmed podcast, or whatever. Whelmed? Dick, did you make him say that?
Recognized, Uncle Walker, D01. Recognized, Emily of Arden, D12.
Hello, team. Thanks for joining us for the second episode of Whelmed, the Young Justice Files Season 2. Welcome to the cave. My name is Rich, and I'm here with my new, not a sidekick, Emily. As many of you know, Caleb has graduated to the Justice League proper.
But he wanted us to remind you to beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jub-Jub bird and shun the flumiest Bandersnatch.
Yeah, this is really good advice, I feel. Thanks, Caleb. He's very considerate, that Caleb. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files, on Facebook at Crashing the Mode, on our website, crashingthemode.com, on Tumblr, theyfiles.tumblr.com, and finally at our email address at whelmedpodcast@gmail.com.
You asked for it. See, I'm a clone. Force-grown in the span of a few months to look like this. McGann somehow saw I could be more than the weapon I was created to be.
Complicated, but sweet. Go on.
McGann's a shapeshifter. To her, looks are clothing for the mind inside. Easy to change, but I'm the opposite. It's become clear the processes used to create me had a side effect. I don't visibly age. At all. I'm not immortal. I'm aging internally. But I'll always look...
This good?
Standard blessing and curse.
And with that housekeeping out of the way, it's time for...
Hello, Megan!
Yes, this week's episode is entitled Earthlings. The release date was May 5th, 2012, which was just 1 week after the previous episode. The in-episode date is January 5th on the planet of Ran. The director is Doug Murphy, and the writer is one of my personal favorites, Nicole Dubuque.
She's amazing. We love Nicole.
I did not realize she wrote all of my favorite episodes until we started listening
pretty much,
to
right?
Whelmed, the first season. I was like, oh, she wrote that, and that, and that. Oh, okay.
I love it. And she's super nice, too, which is just a bonus. Our special guest voice credits are Michael Trucco from Battlestar Galactica as Adam Strange. I think I said in the last episode that he also voiced Captain Atom, but that was completely wrong. So, Rich from the past, you don't know what you're talking about. William Morgan Shepherd does the voice of Sardath. He was the father of Xanatos in the TV show Gargoyles, another Greg Weisman production. He was also in the cult hit way back in the day, Hawk the Slayer, and he did the voice of Merlin in Justice League as well. He's done a bunch of stuff. And with all that, let's get on to our mission briefing.
Just in time for your next mission.
So the pre-credit scene in Meteor Res, we open on the action in a jungle on the planet Ran. Superboy catches an alien woman when her jetpack explodes, and they're being chased by some kind of mech. Post-credits, the action continues as Superboy and the woman nearly fall off a cliff.
And then we get a quick flashback to Adam Strange, or a long flashback, maybe? Yeah, a long flashback. To Adam Strange, Beast Boy, McGann, and Connor having just arrived on Ran from the previous episode. Adam introduces them to the scientist Sardath and his daughter Alana. Though there is a language barrier, McGann uses her mind link to translate between Ranian and English, which I always found very, very cool. Sardath explains that the Ranian Science Council is extremely xenophobic and opposed to Sardath's work, which is developing interplanetary Zeta Beam technology, which is what led to the accident that pulled Adam to Ran in the first place.
Sardath and Alana share what they know about the attack on Ran. Sardath also shares a Zeta-blocking shield that can be placed around the Earth to prevent interplanetary travel. They have also located the Krolatan platform on Ran. Alana offers to guide them through the Ranian jungle to assault the base, and on the way, we see that Connor and McGann are uncomfortable around the affection Alana shows Adam. Beast Boy tries to remind them of better times, but it goes very poorly.
So poorly.
Poor Beast Boy.
I know. The group locates a huge Krolatan building in the jungle. McGann phases through the walls to scout the facility and locates an entrance for her teammates. McGann and Beast Boy plant bombs on the Zeta platforms they have inside the building. Unfortunately, their entrance, which was a portal at the top of the building, becomes blocked when a huge antenna is raised through it to receive dozens of Krolatans that Zetaed from Earth after the assaults we saw in Episode 1. One of the bombs goes off prematurely for some reason, alerting the Krolatans to the team's presence. McGann tears open a door in the facility, eventually allowing the team to escape into the jungle.
The Krolatans then follow in several mechs, bringing us back to our intro scene. Connor and Alana manage to hide in a cave, while Beast Boy and McGann are able to hide using their powers in the jungle. While they're waiting for the patrols to move on, Alana asks Connor how long he and McGann were together, signaling that their awkwardness earlier on was pretty obvious. Connor shares the story you heard at the beginning of our episode and drops the bomb that he broke up with her for some terrible, unexplained reason.
Terrible reason. McGann and Beast Boy enjoy some bonding time as they head toward the mag rail through the jungle, but are stopped abruptly when Beast Boy sees a waterfall and a pool that has him flash back to his mother's death at the hands of Queen Bee, which is a scene that you can read about in the tie-in comics. We get a vision of Garfield's flashback when McGann reads his surface thoughts of his mind. The distraction, unfortunately, lets the Krolatan mechs stun the pair and take them captive. McGann being knocked unconscious also means the translation from her mind link stops.
Alana draws the attention of the mechs, drawing one into a dangerous blue sandbog, while Connor stops the other mech and rescues Beast Boy and Miss Martian. The building the Krolatans were using turns out to be a starship that takes to the air and attempts to either kill or capture the team. Alana stays with McGann, who is still unconscious, while Connor fastball specials Beast Boy at the starship. Beast Boy shifts into a gorilla form and uses the momentum to crash through the ship's exterior. Superboy then leaps in after him.
While they are dealing huge amounts of damage to the inside of this ship, McGann wakes up. Earlier in the episode, McGann had said that the Krolatan minds were too alien for her to easily translate their language or to get any kind of information from them. In fact, she says it would take days or weeks to get anything useful, which makes it particularly disturbing when she grabs one of the Krolatan mech pilots with her telekinesis and rips information out of his mind. Yeah, it was not good. Superboy and Beast Boy abandon the heavily damaged starship before it retreats, but when Superboy sees the unconscious drooling, Krolatan, he clearly knows what McGann did. He tries to call her out on it, but she dismisses him and states, "I know what happened during the missing 16 hours.
Dun dun dun.
Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, there's some Aster in this one. Also, tears.
Yep.
So yeah. Let's move on to that one.
Yeah.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the Aster.
There's a lot. Dear God, I have a
There's
lot
a lot
of notes for this episode.
You got some notes. Yeah, you got some good notes. Why don't you dive in, and then I'll just pepper your notes with my own echoes.
Okay. So I want to start with the fact that this episode was, as I put it, the episode that my 14-year-old heart desperately needed when season 2 premiered, because I was so upset that my ship was not together, and they at least acknowledged that by giving them a little solo episode early on, which kind of made the rest of the season easier.
Yeah, they put it in season 2. I mean, in episode 2. So I mean, I'm pretty glad that they put something in soon enough for the people who were pretty jarred.
Yeah, because whether you shipped it or not, it was a big change, and I wanted some explanation, and we're gonna talk about that later. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cute at the beginning of the episode. There's when Adam first introduces Alana, he's just very clearly crushing on her, and Connor and McGann share this really awkward glance. Like, are we the only ones that notice what's going on between these two? Because, like, Beast Boy doesn't acknowledge it. Her dad doesn't even acknowledge it. But the two of them are just like, we were like that. Oh, God.
He's so not subtle.
He's so not subtle,
his
but I love...
daughter, or something like that.
And his daughter, Alana. I'm like, dude,
Alana.
Chill. But they're super sweet, and it's just another one of those examples of Young Justice doing storytelling through just the animation. There is no line between Connor and McGann of like, wow, look at those two, but you can clearly tell what they're thinking just by them like looking at each other. Oh God.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Just after that too, the Beast Boy with the alien.
I like to think that Beast Boy just sees new animals and is like, can I turn into that? I can. Oh my God. So I feel like that would probably happen like a lot.
It always makes me wonder if he needs to do anything, like does he need to touch it? Does he need to just know that it exists, or?
They show him like going over to it and looking at it really closely and like picking up its wing. So I don't know, maybe he just has to like study them. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find out in season 3.
Yeah, which always is something interesting about his powers, because I think in the comics they describe it that he's tapped into what's called the red. So there's the red and the green, which are these energy fields in DC Comics. The green is actually what Swamp Thing taps into. And if you've seen Justice League Dark, they talk about that a little bit. But characters like Vixen and Animal Man and Beast Boy tap into the red, which is actually attached to like the field of the animal kingdom kind of a thing that are not humans. So I'm wondering if he's going to tap into something like that. I don't know. But it's always been wondering, like, if he can turn into an animal just by looking at it, why can't he shape change into humans? Or is he doing it just as a choice?
And that brings up questions, especially because he does in this episode very briefly. When we get to that heartbreaking scene, he does change back into just him. And I'm like, can you do that all the time or no?
Well, and is that his normal form? Like, is that how he's normal form, and his quote unquote superhero form is his monkey business he's got going on? Or did he like just subconsciously become Gar again, Yeah.
It raises a lot of questions.
It does, yeah.
I always kind of took it as like a subconscious thing of like he can't do it all the time, because we see him later just in like normal clothes, but still Beast Boy face in like later episodes. So I always kind of assumed that I'm like, you can't normally be human Garfield.
Yeah.
But let me see. What else do we got here? Because I have way too many notes. There's the clever bit of writing where when they're asked if they're part of the League, they're associated with the League. Miss Martian just says, we are not members of the League, and moves on. And I just like the idea that she's like, I'm not lying. I'm not going to lie to you. She's like
the pregnant pause. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's like, it's good that you're not associated with the League. And she just goes, yes, we are not members of the League. I'm like,
and also, we're not human. Please stop calling us Earthlings.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Because there's also there's an episode in season 1 where somebody's like, all of you humans, and Connor and McGann both go, we're not human, and just punch the robot in the face. So I just love whenever they bring up, like, we're not humans. We're on Earth, but we're not from Earth.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love when they point out they're like, no, that they're aliens. Moving on to that scene when they're on the train and Beast Boy tries so hard. Alana tells Adam to be careful, and Connor and McGann both look at each other, and then they turn away, and Garfield just looks back and forth between them. And it's so adorable and heartbreaking, but it's a great little nod to Failsafe, which was also written by Nicole Dubuque, like today's episode.
Right.
Where McGann tells Connor to be careful just before she tells him that she loves him for the first time. And then he goes and he dies in that whole Failsafe mental simulation. And I just cry every time. But I love that they have that little nod of like things that would remind them of happier times that out of context, somebody's like, yeah, just be careful. And they're like, remember that time that thing happened? That was emotional, and we're not dating anymore. So
yeah.
So I loved that little nod, especially because she wrote both episodes. So that would be on your mind when you're writing.
Yeah, I like when they make those kind, because you don't have to. I mean, again, it's like this multi-layered scene. You don't have to even remember anything about Failsafe to have the scene make sense by itself.
Definitely.
But if you happen to know about it, then you get this whole extra like gut punch, right? And isn't that where Beast Boy starts doing the Poison Sumac story?
He does afterwards. He starts talking about, remember that time you were in Bialia and Beast Boy and Superboy with the Poison Sumac, and that was That was amusing.
Right.
And it's in the
Wasn't
comics.
that in that? It is. It's in the comics.
It's in the comics. And the comics came out after that episode. So that was really fun being able to read the comic and be like, hey, that's that thing Beast Boy talked about. So
nice.
if you want to read happy SuperMartian where everything isn't sad, buy YJ Comics on Comixology. You get to see them be cute and Superboy not know how poison plants work.
Which is funny because he has all of this like Google, internet like knowledge in his head of all kinds of random pieces of information, but apparently nothing about plants.
He's like, I picked these flowers, and Beast Boy's like, those are poisonous. It's like, oops. It's so cute. Oh, I love them. Going about this, there's also, I love Adam's reference to Through the Looking Glass and the fact that Jabberwocky just doesn't make sense to Alana despite the translation because it doesn't make sense in any language.
Right, exactly. It's just a name of a thing.
Yes. And the whole part that he reads, all of Jabberwocky, for anybody who's read it, it's not technically gibberish because all of it is actual sentences with a sentence structure, but every noun, verb, and adjective is a made-up word. So you understand what's happening, but you can't translate it. So I just thought that little nod was really fun because I like Alice in Wonderland. And the fact that she just repeats it later, not knowing what any of it means, as just a distraction, and we hear it in her language, but with like the word Jabberwocky not translated.
Right.
Which amused me. This is all just in chronological order, so it's jumping about a bit. McGann can density shift now, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, me too. And did we see... I don't think we saw that in episode 1, right? She was invisible
She was just
at the beginning of the
invisible.
episode, but she hadn't density shifted yet, which would have been, if she had, it would have been a clue to us that a significant amount of time had gone by.
So they throw that in and they just have her do it. And I'm like, hey, you have new skills. It's been 5 years. That's cool.
Yeah, and the same thing with the psychic translation.
Yeah.
Because that comes up in the comics at some point.
Yeah.
But they didn't need it in season 1.
No,
right?
I don't think so.
Because they had the links, but they didn't run into anybody that had a language they couldn't understand.
Yeah. After the whole explosions and getting out of the base, and then we get to the heartbreaking scene that we played at the beginning of this episode. That's Connor and Alana in the cave, and before they go, McGann and Connor tell each other to be careful. And again, it's a reference to that one scene in Failsafe, and it's so good, and it makes me cry. But it's also just a great way of establishing their new dynamic, because even though they're not together, and for reasons that we don't know yet, they still really care about each other. And I really liked that, because Young Justice didn't just go, oh, they're not together anymore, they clearly hate each other all the time. Because there's more nuance than that. And it's fine, go off into the dangerous jungle, I don't care what happens to you. It's like, no, be careful, you matter. Whether we're dating or not, you matter. So that was just a nice little touch. Half of my notes are just the words I cry in all capital letters, because I am clearly emotionally stable about this episode. How long were you and she together all my life is such a great line. I love it. It makes me super emotional. I just want to shout out to how good a line that is. And
the big reveal of the fact that he dumped her, and we kept thinking it was the other way around.
Yes. Oh, God. And in that same scene, when Superboy explains how psychic translation works and all of that, I love it because it both establishes the mechanics of the world and like her powers and everything, and like fleshes that out more fully. But it also shows that Connor cared enough about McGann to actually learn exactly how her powers work. And it's such a subtle way of revealing both more about their relationship and about the world that Young Justice is set in. And it's just so cool. It's show, don't tell. And show, don't tell is important. But sometimes when you tell one thing, it shows something completely different. Because if they had McGann say those exact same words, it would have felt like clunky info dumping that nobody would have wanted to listen to. We're like, oh, we're just explaining this so everybody knows, fine. But because they have Connor say it, it says a whole lot more. And I just think that's very clever writing. Give us a little exposition without having to make it feel like exposition.
Right, and exactly. And it's about layering information
definitely.
for various things. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the Canary Debrief as well, but it's about layering relationships, layering data, but layering your world and how the mechanics work and what happens, and have that, not having people saying things like, well, as you all know, my mother died when I was 5. Okay, well, if everybody knows, then why are you even saying it? Like, you're clearly saying that for the audience. Stop doing that. Like, have
so
us
true.
ask questions, and have it be revealed in context cues, Ugh, drives me nuts. Anyway, where were you? Where were you at?
This is where we find out that Connor doesn't age. We find out that Connor is always going to look 16, which I think is also in the comics, in the classic DC with Superboy. But that was just such a heartbreaking moment of him having to explain that and talking about how McGann doesn't care what anybody looks like. McGann cares about people. And that's just so good. This scene is so good. I'm not sure if I've made it clear how much I love this scene yet.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing scene on so many levels. The writing, the character development, the need, like you mentioned, to have this scene in for people who were jarred by that first episode. There is everything in that scene was absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Nolan North does an amazing job.
Yeah, so it's that scene with Alana was fantastic. And then the 30-second scene with Gar, like,
yes. It's so short and they don't even say anything.
Right, pretty much exactly, right? And so they go from this like giggling, like they get to introduce all of this relationship between McGann and Gar that has happened over these 5 years that's just so amazing. And, if you remembered how all of this happened and put those pieces together, it all makes a lot of sense and you understand how close they got. But then you don't know anything about what happened with Gar's mom. You assume she's still alive and blah, blah, blah. Because I don't think the comics had come out yet that showed that scene where she died. But when he goes from so much laughing and giggling and that brother-sister dynamic that they clearly love each other, and then he just stops and like shifts back into, just green Garfield, it's such a jarring moment that it really makes you pay attention. And then when they shift, you just see a waterfall with a pool, but then they overlay everything. And the fact that they use the idea that McGann's was climbing into his brain to see what he was seeing allows us to see what he was seeing. So you could do it without that connection, right? You can do it and get really tight first-person view inside his mind, and probably no one would think twice about it. But because you have McGann there, who's a telepath, it makes so much more sense to build character and connection and have us see it through her eyes. Put emphasis on so many things in this short scene, and her saying like she should have been there to do something about it. God, I'm like, I don't know about.
So heartbreaking. It's such a gut punch of a scene. Like even rewatching it, I was like, oh, this is painful. This is painful to watch.
No, I've watched that so many times, and I just cry for him. It's just horrible. And I know I've said it a few times in the show, but it also sets up some other stuff because his parents were killed in the comics as well. And he was adopted by Rita Farr, who is an actress who is a friend of his mother's. And Rita helped raise him. She, of course, became a member of the Doom Patrol. And he had adventures with the Doom Patrol as well. And the Doom Patrol is an organization that actually predates, by not very long, but predates the X-Men. And the reason I bring that up is because they, as opposed to Professor X, they had a character they called the Chief, who was a fully bearded, fully haired guy in a wheelchair, as opposed to the bald, no beard professor in the X-Men. And the Doom Patrol was Robot Man, Elastigirl before the Incredibles. She could grow and shrink too, I believe. And then Negative Man. And then Gar was actually running around with him for quite a bit. And because they introduced Rita Farr, at least as a character name, in Hello Megan, which makes much more sense that she knows Gar's mother, it's possible they might throw some Doom Patrol stuff in. And Doom Patrol is pretty cool. So it might just be comic book stuff. They put it in the comics, maybe not in the main show. But either way, I would love to see a little nod to them.
Definitely. They're super cool. That scene is heartbreaking. this whole episode.
Oh, you do make a really good point. The point, I just noticed that this episode too, the fact that McGann gets knocked unconscious by the robots, or by the mechs. They rescue McGann and Beast Boy, and Beast Boy kind of snaps out of it faster for some reason. I guess McGann took the brunt of it. I don't know. But she's still unconscious for a while, but she still says Connor's name when she's unconscious.
Yeah.
Which I only just caught this watching, which I think is really... I think I'm paying more attention to these things because of you.
Because I'm around.
So,
just
that's right.
romantic moments are important. Gosh,
They are, the smoochies. That's right.
But yeah, McGann says his name while she's unconscious, and Connor tells Alana to, like, take care of her. And he's so gentle, even though they're not together. And especially after the reveal that he broke up with her, you'd assume he'd be so mad, because we know Connor can be a being of pure rage sometimes. But just those moments where he is so gentle and he cares so much about her, and even though we don't know why they broke up or any of that, he still clearly cares about her, and they put such an emphasis on that through just these subtle little things. Like, Gar gets up and jumps out of the mech, and Connor just picks her up and carries her. He's making sure she's okay, and it's so good. It's such good storytelling of showing how even at their worst, even when they are so mad at each other, they're both still so gentle and have this 5-year history with each other. And I love it.
Mm-hmm. And overall in the episode too, it shows that their relationship doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Gar is affected by this too. I mean, if they've become this close over that 5-year break, then he's going to feel incredibly close to Superboy over 5 years, right? Particularly since his mom died, like right after the season 1, apparently based on the comics, you know? Yeah. So if his mom died and then McGann was taking care of him or being a part of his life, Connor's going to be like a big brother to him. And he was an only child, so...
Yeah, I've talked about this before with friends and stuff about how it's kind of joked about in this episode and shown in other episodes that that Beast Boy ships SuperMartian is how I kind of say it, that he wants them to be together. He kind of pushes for them to be together. But also the fact that I feel like because of his childhood, because we see that he's raised by a single mom, his dad's not around, we don't know about who his dad is or what's up with that, and they're kind of living secluded. They don't really show him interacting with a lot of other people. I feel like Connor and McGann was one of the few stable relationships he saw in his life. And then to see them really break up after 5 years, I feel like would have been so hard for him, because like he's close to McGann, which would make him close to Superboy and all of that. But just that idea of being like him seeing them, and the comics play with it too, because the whole Poison Sumac thing, Connor's there, they're all kind of interacting. Seeing them as like they're happy, they're together, they're what a relationship is, and then they break up and they don't tell the team why they broke up. The team doesn't know, is kind of emphasized in the comics and things. Nobody knows why they broke up, but they just did.
Yeah, and probably very suddenly as well.
Yeah, the comics even play with that. If they break up pretty suddenly, and Nightwing even has to ask them if they're still okay to work with each other, because nobody knows what happened. Just that idea of them breaking up, and that how that affects Garfield, and how he does seem emotionally affected by that and feels pretty bad that they're not together anymore, is just such a nice subtle storytelling thing in this episode and just in general.
Well, I was going to say, like, I remember my brother left for the Air Force when I was 9. So right about Gar's age when he got his powers, right? So between 8 and 13 years old for Gar, that's hugely formidable time in a kid's life, you know? And so to have Superboy, like I said, like have that big brother status, but have him basically showing him what it means to be a man, right? If he doesn't have a dad around and all that stuff. I'm glad they put a little something in here about him shipping them, but I would like to see a little bit more from his perspective on how that affected him over the 5 years, you know, or not over the 5 years, but in the last, I don't know. Did they say how long they'd broken up? Because she's with Lagan.
Things that I know only because I hyper-focus on these things and read the comics as they were coming out. The comics are set, the last series of comics, the last part of the comics are set in December. And in December, right before season 2 would have started, they have just broken up.
Okay.
Then she gets together with Lagan. It's kind of implied that like by the end of that comic run that was only a day or two in universe, they're kind of moving towards getting together. So her and Lagan have only been together for a few weeks, and her and Superboy have only been broken up for a few weeks.
Oh my God.
She literally
Wow.
gets
Okay.
together with Lagan like less than a week after after Superboy breaks up with her, because the
Crazy. Oh, wow.
last stretch of the comics was set on Nightwing's birthday. And the
Oh,
fact
that's
that
right.
he has to,
That's right.
and I going by context clues, just because he has to ask if they're still okay to work on the same team. I'm assuming that it was probably pretty recently, because you don't have that conversation several weeks after you've broken up. I feel like they would have been pretty recently. First mission after that type of thing. So, yeah, they've been broken up for like less than a month at this point.
Yeah. Kind of, I don't know, reflective of McGann. I don't know how to put this. Like, we'll find out. We could crash the mode a little bit on this because we find out, of course, later what happened. But really, some of that gets kind of seeded here with, I mean, we're clearly seeing toward the end of season 1 that McGann has a lot of power, right? Yeah. We have Failsafe, where we see that she can telepathically rend control from John, who's one of the most powerful telepaths on the planet, you know, and then now we see her just literally ripping, you know, causing a traumatic brain injury to this alien, pulling information out of his head. She's scary.
Yeah.
McGann becomes very scary.
I refer to her here as a terrifying demigod, which I believe is something I pulled from Art Mask's AP when we played. Somebody said something that I, as Miss Martian, did was a terrifying demigod. I'm like, kind of, a little bit.
Well, so she's telepathic. She can fly. She can turn invisible. She can walk through walls, and she's telekinetic.
Yeah.
Like, and she can shape change.
I wouldn't want to mess with her.
So you, well, and then I think I said this in our Secret Origin about her too. You better hope she's a good guy. You know, like, you better hope she's on the side of people around her, because she can imitate anyone to a T, right? Because she can read their mind and then shape change into them. She can be in any room. Like, nothing can stop her getting into any room and getting any information she wants about anything. And, you know, we see her using the kind of what I call macro effects of telekinesis, like grabbing people and, you know, slamming, you know, drones together and that kind of stuff. But the thing that's really interesting to me, there's a great, I think it's 24 issue kind of macro series called Rising Stars, which is a brilliant comic, and everybody should go check that out. But in Rising Stars, one of the few superpowered beings in the world has telekinetic powers, but her telekinetic powers only work on a micro level. So she can't pick up like a crate, but she eventually becomes an assassin for the CIA because she can literally stop the blood flow to somebody's brain on a micro level. And so it made me completely rethink of what telekinesis can do to someone, which means McGann becomes even more terrifying, right? Yeah, just scary. And I can see Superboy being like, because he's not just worried for her, he kind of seems a little scared. You know, like, what did you do? Never mind that. He's like, no, don't never mind that. Like, you can reprogram brains, erase memories, and probably just stop my heart with telekinesis. Like, this is a potential problem that we need to talk about. You know?
Yes. And that scene of her doing whatever it is she did to that alien, the closest thing we've seen with that was her and Simon, which was her just lashing out and not knowing what she was doing. I wrote down here that scene is such, followed by what comes right after it, is such great juxtaposition between that scene of her attacking this guy and this dramatic music of her just grabbing him out of thin air and ripping something out of his mind. Juxtaposed with her just casually getting a souvenir for Garfield and just like handing it to him. And I feel like that scene really represents so much of like the great duality of her character, especially in season 2. I feel like it's there in season 1 to a little bit of a lesser extent, but as season 2 goes on, we see that Miss Martian is both a terrifying demigod and a ball of sunshine at the same time, all the time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of terrifying.
If Gar had known where that came from, the fact that she gave it to him and she didn't even think about the consequence or the context in which she was giving it to him, it's like, oh, I got you this souvenir. Like she picked it up from the ground.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to basically destroying someone's life. That's crazy, right? But you said your brother made a disturbing kind of counterpoint to the conversation we're having here. Yeah?
Indeed, because I watched these episodes with my brother, who was just kind of in the room making occasional comments. And he pointed out that, like, when you look at it, and when you look at that scene, and when you look at stuff that unfolds later, maybe the sun's up and crashing the mode, I don't know, you can make the argument that she may have just saved everyone on Earth by kind of killing one guy. And when you get into that, it gets into the complicated nature of superheroes and what you're allowed to do and how DC has the superheroes don't kill rule and everything. But then it brings up questions of, like, if you're saving the entire planet, what happens if you kill one alien? And I don't want to get into a moral conversation about everything all at once, because it's a big debate. But I feel like it's kind of important to acknowledge that too.
Yeah. I actually just saw this as well. I saw this in another DC-related animated series recently because I just picked up season 2 of the Legion of Superheroes animated series, which Brandon Vietti apparently directed a bunch of episodes in and that kind of thing, which I find pretty awesome. But in that, there was an episode where this Superman clone from the 41st century has come back to the 31st century where the Legion takes place, the stories take place, and this horrifying, like, Darkseid, like, galactic villain has come back to the 31st century with him and is trying to take over the universe. Well, there's a little boy who gets kidnapped, and it looks like he's going to be killed by this bounty hunter, and this Superman alternate saves the little boy's life. But he ends up finding out that the villain I was just telling you about, this Darkseid villain, is also trying to save this boy's life, which is confusing and weird. So during a conversation, you find out that this little boy eventually grows up to create the technology, the cybernetic technology, that leads to the big bad guy villain being created in the first place. So the big bad guy villain wants this kid alive so that he can still exist, and at one point even offers to the Superman clone, he's like, this is what your whole life is about. You kill him, you kill me. Go for it. And the little kid's like 8 and horrified. And this Superman doesn't do it, because morally it's objectionable.
Yeah.
But then you think about it, and this other guy has basically destroyed a galaxy. So, like, what do you do with that, right?
That also gets into timey-wimey craziness, where if you get into time travel, then you can mess everything up. But yeah, I think it's, but those questions of when is it okay to do this? Is it ever okay to do this? Are kind of important, because I think so many people immediately when this episode came out kind of jumped down McGann's throat being like, whatever it is that she just did, it's wrong, and it is always wrong. And I feel like there is some strength behind that argument, especially with things that happen later in the season. But at the same time, I feel like this season does a lot with moral grayness. Like she says, I know what happened in those 16 hours. We wouldn't have known that if she didn't do that. There wouldn't be any sort of plan for the rest of the season if she doesn't do this. Or maybe there would be. Maybe it would have taken a while. Yeah. Maybe in that time, a lot more people would have gotten hurt. A lot of what if questions.
Right.
So,
it makes it's, you know, we said this a lot in this first season, like Young Justice does a really, really good job of walking a line of being an animated series on Cartoon Network, you know, for a wide range of audiences, but also at least alluding to, if not dealing with directly, some pretty tough issues, like Superboy and the Shields and Artemis and her parents and, you know, like her family life and all of these things, you know, and this one is one that you can't, I mean, they definitely deal with it, but boy, if you sit and dive a little deeper into it, it's messed up, you know? And I think in our conversation, our discussion episode, I even talked about, like, I'm not convinced I want her to get back together with him. because what she did was so not okay. I'm not sure how much someone should be forgiven for that action, you know?
Yeah.
So
it's a complicated question.
It is, yeah. Well, let's move on from that. We got super heavy. Let's talk about Adam Strange.
Adam Strange is cool. He's got a jetpack and recites Alice in Wonderland quotes. He's cool.
Nice. Adam Strange. I talked about him a lot in the last episode, but yeah, Adam Strange, man. You get to see him in the costume, basically a reflection of his costume from the comics. I'm a big John Carter of Mars fan. When I was a kid, I read those books, and I love them. So this whole idea of kind of John Carter of Mars combined with, Buck Rogers or whatever, it was so interesting. And I'm curious as to whether or not in a later season he will, become this character from the comics that he was. I don't know. I'm really interested in that. So ending on a little bit lighthearted note there anyway. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how. I always wonder how Adam Strange is going to land on a modern audience, but I think they did a good job of modernizing him and making him relatable.
Yeah. I don't know what he was like in the olden comics, but I thought he was pretty cool. The olden comics, yeah.
ye old comics.
Ye oldie comics from Ye Oldie Comic Book Shop A. But I enjoyed him.
One of the things they do so well in Young Justice 2 is taking these old classics and actually making them relevant to a modern audience. So hopefully that will continue with him as well.
Just from his brief appearance in this and a few other episodes, I can see how he could have been a very pulpy, campy character back in the day, but I feel like he still maintains that level of whatever his character used to be while still being new and modern and interesting.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our Canary Debrief here and talk about a few things. And then we got some modes to crash, a couple modes to crash.
Yeah.
Stick around. Class is in session.
So the Canary Debrief I want to talk about today is about layering your reveals or your information. Emily and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but Superboy and McGann's relationship and what happened and why they aren't together, we know that they're not together. We know that Connor broke up with her for some reason. Of course, that plays against the expectation we had because we see that he's broken up about it and she's with somebody else. So we assumed it was the other way around. But we don't get the final details. And that helps get us grounded, at least relatively early in this season, about this drastic change from season 1. But it also encourages us to ask the right questions and want to know the answers and want to keep watching to find those answers. We trust the writers and the showrunners to present this information at some point. They haven't lost our trust as storytellers. And so we are willing to say, okay, now I have enough. Thank you for that. But I do still want to know more. Let's keep watching and keep going. But it's not just with character development. It's also about, as Emily noted earlier, it's about layering the mechanics of the world naturally. Not having huge sections of exposition just to explain how the world works when everybody already knows how the world works, right? Being able to have Connor explain to Alana how McGann's telepathy works fits in naturally and smoothly and gives us more input later on. And earlier in the episode even, when Beast Boy says, why don't you just read their minds just like you've done everything else? Now, as a watcher, I was asking that question as well, so it was natural that Beast Boy asked it. McGann gave the answer to it, but it just wasn't that in a vacuum. It wasn't just her answering a question about the thing that was happening at the moment. It was also layering information to us that we could carry on later in the episode to feed in the emotional punch of the fact that she pulled this information out of this Krolatane's mind and how horrifying that is. So when you have a big world or even a small world and you want to give information to your readers, please try to work hard not to just give a big giant wall of text explanation about something. Fold it into the dialogue, fold it into the storyline as much as you can so that things become revealed naturally and organically over time. And yeah, now we've been dodging around it the whole time. Let's crash this mode.
Tell us something we don't know yet. Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy.
and we're still dodging around it. We're just like, yeah, that thing.
Yeah, the thing. No, we gotta look at clearly how McGann's using her powers, and we're gonna see. This is again reflecting back to the layering that I was just talking about, because during the whole season they're layering how effective she is at doing this job, and what lengths she will go to when someone is considered a villain. She will do whatever it takes to get the job done. And then she puts Aqualad in that category, a murderous villain that deserves everything. And we get to live that moment. Like that the way they presented that, we were like, oh no. Like we had just enough time to like know that this was all going to go horribly wrong and then watch the horror happen in front of us. That takes an incredible amount of timing and planning, and I think, as Jason Spizak said, like putting deposits in the emotional bank so that the writers could take that withdrawal and have it be so effective.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Because if you don't have these moments early on, then you're just like, wait, what's she doing? What's happening? Oh, what? She can do that now? Oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
Whereas because they have those moments early on showing her powers and showing how far she can go with them and how far she is willing to go with them, when it does happen, you're like,
yeah,
oh no, you know exactly how bad it is, and you know it's just so,
it's not telling us, it's letting us take that emotional ride, right?
Yes.
We get to know something that neither character knows. Aqualad does not know how McGann has been using her powers, and McGann does not know that Aqualad theoretically is not a traitor. So we know something and see the pieces fit together before anybody else does. And we're the only ones privy to that information.
Yeah.
And that is amazing.
And it makes the fact that no one else in that scene or any of the scenes afterwards knows, besides Superboy, makes it even more painful. Because everyone's just like, oh, you did the right thing. It doesn't matter what you did. It's fine.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there as viewers being like, no, we know what she did. Oh, God. So,
it's funny because our Masks game is either airing currently or coming up soon. And I've been running Masks recently, and there's a bunch of tenets about running Masks, which I find really interesting. And one of them is the fact that all the adults have influence over the player characters who are teenagers. But in addition to that, there's some guidelines about how to play adults, and that adults in these teen worlds are relatively short-sighted and kind of over the top with their thought processes and what they do. And I was thinking about that in the scene and this comes up, I think, in the next episode, where McGann comes back. She tells everybody about the 16 hours, and then they send her over to the Hall of Justice, and Batman is literally telling her what he wants her to do. Oh, we thought you might be helpful with your strange ability to be able to translate. Maybe you can help us. And then like drool comes down this guy's face, and like it looked like John was even in that guy's head at the time. Like he didn't see any of this happening. Like, so part of me is kind of like, okay, that's definitely stretching just a little bit the fact that Batman didn't piece all this together, or that Jean didn't sense something was happening, right? Or even the fact that afterwards it's like, oh, she talked to him and suddenly he had a stroke. Like, these are the things that are like, I would think Batman might have suspected at the time. But looking at it from a Masks role-playing game perspective, the idea of that adults are a little short-sighted.
Adults know
makes
nothing.
Actually, right,
Kids are
exactly.
awesome.
It's kind of funny. And I did have some notes here about talking about Marie Logan. I know we talked about it a bit in depth earlier, but man, there's so much that they can do. And if they dive into Beast Boy more, I would be so happy.
Me too.
Yes. We'll see what they may or may not want to do with that, but I don't know. We'll see. All right, so that's it. I think we can consider this mode successfully crashed. Oh, wait, we didn't even... You know what? We dodged it. We didn't actually talk about what McGann did to Superboy.
Oh, we still dodged it.
We didn't actually say... We managed to dodge it again. Yeah.
McGann tried to make Connor forget he was mad at her when they had a discussion about how she was using her powers.
She was going to alter his memory.
And I find it interesting that they never say that she tried to alter his memory. Exactly. They just say she wanted to make him forget he was mad at her. She tried to change how he felt about the situation, which is also terrifying. I find it interesting how
that's just rough.
Because they don't say she tried to make him forget that she was doing this. They say she tried to make him forget he was mad, and that is terrifying on another level. And we're gonna get to that eventually and dive into that.
Yeah, we will. Let's dive.
But there we go.
Let's dive
we
into
didn't
that
avoid
later.
it.
All right, let's get on to some fan service. So we're both listening to this right now. We're actually going to be doing the fan service this week is not Young Justice specific, but it's actually a Masks actual play podcast by a group called Nerds on a Roll. And you can find them at Nerds on a Roll on Twitter. And I think you could just Google Nerds on a Roll, and it's going to probably pop up with this actual play. They're about 5 episodes into it. I'll let you know the sound quality early on is a little bit rough. They haven't kind of sussed out their mics yet. They're recording a room full of people on a single mic, which makes it a little tough sometimes to listen to. But the quality of the storytelling in this game is amazing. If you are a fan of Young Justice, you're clearly a fan of teenage superhero stories. I would pop over there and give Nerds on a Roll a try. I am shockingly drawn into this game. And I think, Emily, you finished through episode 5 right before I did.
Yeah, I am all caught up with what exists right now. When we are recording this, tomorrow is when episode 6 comes out. I'm very excited. But yeah, it's so great. I love their storytelling. I love everything about it. They also do a lot of really great stuff with music cues, which is really cool. There are some things in a few of the later episodes where dramatic moments are cued to awesome music, and that just makes them even better. Mm-hmm. But they do a great job. They have a really interesting team of characters, and they play with a lot of the tropes of these characters in a really fun ways. It's funny and dramatic at the same time. Like, there were moments where I was like, oh my God, what is happening here? And there were other moments where I was laughing my head off. So I feel like that's when you can get that balance right. You're doing teen superheroes good.
Yeah. I mean, the characters are great. They're a little bit on the, like she said, like almost like the sillier end of the tropes. Like the Golden Glove is the boxing legacy character, and Kid Katie, which is played by a woman whose name is Katie. So I don't know if she wants to be Kid Katie. This is like a personification of her. I don't know, but we're definitely going to try to have one or more of them on the show for a discussion session to chat about this show. But go check it out at Nerds on a Roll on Twitter, or you can
and Facebook and Instagram and everywhere. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. Go check them out. And then pretty soon, I think they're going to have their audio upgraded fairly soon, thanks to a donation to their Patreon. And so I'm looking forward to that too, because they clearly care about the story they're telling, and I'm excited about it. So thanks so much, guys, for putting on a great show. And that's it. So I think we can wrap up this mission and head out of the cave. Remember that the best way to support our show is with a 5-star review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice.
Please continue to #KeepBingingYJ and #BuyYJComics on Comixology. You can also now use #YoungJusticeOutsiders when talking about Season 3. And if you want to help us get more episodes, more Secret Origins, actual play podcasts, and more, please consider supporting us through Patreon. For just a few dollars a month, you can help us do even more with the show while getting some great rewards for yourself. And remember,
stay whelmed, everyone.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our hosts are Rich Howard and Emily Booza. Our editor and producer is Neil Powell. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.